Very soon, the Supreme Court could definitively rule on the legality of same-sex marriage across the United States. Now, if they do that, how will the presidential candidates react? We don't know about all of them, but we do know about Mike Huckabee because of comments he made over the weekend, and we have video of it. Let's watch.
You also seem to indicate that as president, you wouldn't necessarily obey court rulings, even the Supreme Court. But, Governor, we have operated under the principle of judicial review since the Marbury versus Madison case in 1803.
Judicial review is exactly what we've operated under. We have not operated under judicial supremacy. Presidents Lincoln, Jefferson, Jackson, presidents have understood that the Supreme Court cannot make a law. They cannot make it. The legislature has to make it. The executive branch has to sign it and enforce it. And the notion that the Supreme Court comes up with a ruling and that automatically subjects the two other branches to following it defies everything there is about the three equal branches of government. Chris, the Supreme Court is not the supreme branch, and for God's sake, it isn't the supreme being.
It's not the supreme branch when it's not convenient for me and my political agenda. And one other thing, I mean, does he not understand how the Supreme Court ruling is going to work? They're not going to create policy. They're just going to deem the gay marriage ban unconstitutional, if that, right? And so for him to say that they're going to sit there and be like, okay, let's see, let's draw up new legislation and then let's vote on it, and then that's it. That's going to be law. That's not how it's going to work.
Yeah.
No, you really couldn't get a more fundamental misunderstanding of how our government works than what you just saw there from Mike Huckabee.
Yeah.
When he says that they don't have judicial supremacy, that's actually not true. They do. They can declare laws passed by Congress and signed by the president unconstitutional. That's what Chris Wallace was referring to when he talked about Marbury versus Madison.
Yeah.
That's where we decided that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of whether laws passed are constitutional or not. And they can strike down those laws. Anna's right. When they strike down parts of Obamacare, the Republicans celebrate and go, yes, judicial supremacy, right?
Supreme being.
Yeah.
Now, there are Supreme Court cases that I despise, and I wish I could just, if I had a magic wand, as Bush used to say, I'd flick them away. For example, Citizens United, right?
Yes.
And so now I can't do that, though. I think it has destroyed this country, including earlier decisions in Buckley v. Vallejo and Bellotti. It has allowed corruption on a mass scale. But the Supreme Court is the final arbiter.
Yeah.
So we don't get to say, okay, I don't like it, so I'm not going to follow that. Okay, that's it. I'm arresting everybody who gave money to Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
It's like a first grader's understanding of how the Supreme Court works. Do they know about the Supreme Court? I don't know. But if they did, this is how they would understand it. It's so idiotic. Like, I mean, you could take issue with Marbury versus Madison, and you could read the Constitution and say it does not literally say that this is how things are supposed to work. But we've had it as a tradition for over 200 years. It seems to have worked largely okay. I can think of a few terrible cases in terms of slavery where it did not. But that's the way that it works, and it's stupid to say that, well, they're supreme and there's nothing we can do about it if they make a law. It's not the case. Look, first of all, if same-sex marriage does actually sort of become law as a result of their ruling, it will be on the back of not just liberals in the court, but at least one justice who was put in there by conservative presidents, by a Republican president and Congress as well. And you can, if you still want to make it illegal, you can do that by passing a constitutional amendment. They are not supreme over everything. There is a system of checks and balances.
Exactly.
It continues the same way it has for hundreds of years.
What you just saw right there was complete disregard for our system of checks and balances, does not respect it at all. And also, think about what this entire debate is all about. He's saying if I become president, I will ensure that gay people will not be able to get married. Why? Because he thinks that that's some sort of perversion, right? Well, why don't you consider the fact that you just last week wrote a Facebook post supporting someone who molested his own sisters? You want to talk to me about morality and who should be able to get married or not? I mean, I don't take anything that man says seriously. And neither should his supporters, especially when you consider who he supports and who he's out against.
So first, John is right. You can pass an amendment that goes above the Supreme Court. That's what we want to do with Wolfpack to get rid of Citizens United. Anna's right that you can't, this is a dangerous thing that this guy is saying. He's saying if I become president, he's basically telling you right now, I'm going to ignore the Supreme Court. At least the ones that I don't like. The ones I do like, if they're against Obamacare, et cetera, they're in favor of money deluging politics and corrupting politics. Great, I'm in favor of that. That's awesome, right? But things I don't like, I'm just going to ignore it. Yep. It's unbelievable. Then you don't believe in the American form of government, right? And then let's talk about two other things he mentioned there. They're the Supreme Court. They're not the supreme being. Okay, wait a minute.
He has a point. The Supreme Court exists.
Right. Now, are you saying that, so you're going to listen to, if you're the president, you're going to listen to the supreme being over the Supreme Court? Well, how the fuck do we know what the Picard says, right? And what he means? Like, how do you know what the supreme being? Oh, no, I know. I talk to God. He says incest when it's my buddies over at the Duggar family is awesome, right?
Yeah.
He says me executing people down in Arkansas, even though it says clearly in the Bible I shouldn't do that, is awesome because I am the ultimate arbiter. I am the Supreme Court. I am the one who communicates with the supreme being. And so if the Supreme Court doesn't agree with me and on this issue of gay rights, well, too bad, then I'm not going to listen to them. Well, that's incredibly dangerous. I don't want a guy who thinks he's talking to a sky god or anyone in the sky or any invisible person to be our president in America. I mean, we kind of had that with George Bush, and we kind of invaded a country we shouldn't have invaded, partly based on that, and it turned out to be disastrous. This guy is at least being clearer about it and saying, my imaginary conversation with the supreme being will be more important than Supreme Court decisions. That is full-blown nuts.
Yeah.
And finally, he said at another part of the interview that we didn't run for you guys, could you imagine it? He said if the Supreme Court just decided who was going to be the next president?
I know. That's amazing that he said that. Amazing.
Yeah, I could kind of imagine that because it kind of happened, right? And Bush v. Gore. And guess what? Conservatives like Huckabee loved it when the Supreme Court did that.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I look forward to Lindsey Graham releasing a statement attacking Mike Huckabee for attempting to set up a supreme religion over all others.